Hi everyone, welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan, and today on Wandering DMs, we're going to be talking about mentorship in D&D. How do you give guidance to new players of a role-playing game? Or maybe memories, have you had good coaches or teachers that made an impact on your learning about a game or a sport? All that and more today on Wandering DMs.
Before we get into that, as always, I'll remind everyone that at the end of the show, we will be hosting our after-party chat on our private Discord server. That is a video chat with Dan and I and all of our patrons, and you can join in that chat by becoming a patron. Visit us at patreon.com/wanderingdms. Pitch in at any tier, and you'll get an invite to the private Discord server, and at 2 o'clock Eastern, we'll be over there, and you can join us for the after chat.
We love that every week. We look forward to that so much. And of course, good day to any of you if you're wrapping up PAX Unplugged this Sunday. Hope you had a good weekend over there, and hope you have a good travel home, maybe as you're checking in with our Sunday show here. Happy PAX Unplugged, everybody.
Excellent. So, things look to be working. Sorry, we had a little technical hiccup there at the start, but it looks like we're on, and I'm seeing viewers show up, so that's great. Dan, thank you, and thank you to our viewers for indulging me in somewhat of an unusual topic today. This is mine, and it's a little squirrely. But let me give a little bit, if I can, a little bit of background of why this is on my mind. I'll sort of say as much as I can without breaking any NDAs. But if you'll indulge me, this is on my mind not actually because of Dungeons and Dragons, but because of Wizards' other big license, of course, which is Magic the Gathering. So recently, I have had the need to really dive deep into Magic the Gathering, learn not only the mechanics of it, but the how it's created, how it's distributed, the culture of Magic playing, etc. And personally, I have a little bit of an odd relationship with the game. Maybe you do too, Dan. So players
Talk to
or
me,
viewers,
brother.
yeah. The viewers may be surprised. Neither Dan and I are really. I'm sure that there are lots of Magic players in our viewership, but I personally was never much of a Magic player. That said, I'm very aware of the game. In fact, I was at Gen Con 93 when it was released, and I was at Gen Con 94 when it really took off. I remember them having Wizards of the Coast had a little booth, just a normal booth in 93, and by 94, as I was walking through Mecca in Milwaukee, you just couldn't walk down a hallway without just being lined with people sitting on the floor playing Magic. That was the difference between 93 and 94. It was
Wow.
still is, frankly.
Huh.
But maybe they're a little more organized these days. And then personally, I played a little bit of Magic back then, but as the CCG craze kind of hit, right, and lots of different CCGs came out, I actually got involved in a different one. Personally, I was a Legend of the Five Rings or L5R player for quite a few years. That game, though, didn't really survive the fad. A lot of CCGs came out in the 90s, and barely any of them really survived. I mean, these days, what do you see? Magic and Pokemon, I think, is probably about the landscape these days. Somehow those have survived, whereas all the others have kind of faded into the historical annals. Anyway, why am I bringing up Magic? So I needed to learn about it, and I needed to learn deep about it, not just like how to tap a card and what a land card is. Like I knew the basics, but I needed to go deep. So I put a Facebook post out because I figured there are probably lots of Magic players in my general acquaintance, and I just said, "Hey, friends, I need to learn Magic. Who lives nearby that would be willing to meet up and talk to me, maybe play some games, etc." I got a lot of responses. Frankly, a lot. They're Magic players, at least those in my acquaintance, are very eager to teach the game and to share it with others. So that was great. That was fantastic. But I just started to notice some things that struck me as a little odd as I started to dig in, and maybe this is. My experience is a little colored here by basically being away from the game for almost 3 decades. Right? So, so when what I remember from the game when it first came out is that there were two different things you could buy. You could buy a starter deck and you could buy booster packs. And the starter deck, I'll just show some visual aids here. So the starter deck was like a box of cards, like you buy a normal poker deck, right? Came in this little foldy
Yep.
thing, right, had about 40 cards in there, and it was playable right out of the box. I buy a box, you buy a box, Dan. We can crack the seal, get the cards out, and we can play. And
Great.
then you could also, and I think there was like 40 cards in there, and I think that was kind of standard size back then. Was 40 cards. I know it's 60
Yes,
cards.
right. I think so. Yep. Okay. Wow.
And then you could also buy a booster pack, which was a little foil wrapped, 15 cards. And the recommendation from Wizards of the Coast back then was like, if you want to get into the game, buy yourself a starter deck and 2 boosters. It's a great way to start. That gave you just enough cards to kind of play around with,
right.
like experience not only the game of playing against people, but also get a little bit of the customization deck building part of the game, which is fascinating, right? Because I think that's a part of it, a part of the game that there's some commonalities here between these two games. There's a lot, frankly, a lot of commonalities between Magic and Dungeons and Dragons. And one of them being that there's this other part of the game that you do by yourself, right? Maybe only us DMs kind of partake in that as part of Dungeons and Dragons. My players probably spend some time poring over books and looking at their characters and tuning stuff. So there's a solo component to this game, as well as what you actually do at the table with friends.
Yep.
Here's what struck me as really weird, Dan. These starter boxes, they don't exist anymore. They don't make them. It's not a thing. Yeah.
What?
So, and yes, there's various ways to get in the game now that's digital. There's Magic the Gathering online, and there's Magic Arena, which is more folks are playing that.
Okay.
And whatnot. But if you want to go to a store and buy some cards, there are some things that they sell that are specifically starter kits, which come with like 2 pre-constructed decks and a rule book, and like very, very much geared to like, this is how you learn how to play, right? It is very much an introductory learn to play the game with this thing. Other than that, it's just boosters.
Huh.
And it's really bizarre because, so, I mean, heck, let me show this other thing. Wait, I got one other picture here. This came back then in 93. This came in your box of cards. You got a starter deck, came with 40 cards in it, a lot of lands, because that's important to building your Magic deck. The game is not really playable without a lot of lands in your deck. And this little booklet, card-sized rule book that taught you how to play the game, right? Well, that's not available in boosters. So when I went out and I was like, I don't know, I guess I need to buy some cards. I bought a whole bunch of boosters. In fact, I bought. I'll just show it to you. I bought this sucker. This is one of the more recent sets. This is a box of 30 boosters in here.
Oh,
cracked them open. No rules. I had to go online to find the rules. Maybe I should have bought the starter set, but I was like, I kind of know the basics of how to play the game. I don't need that starter nonsense, right? I can just dive in.
Yeah. Okay.
Every one of those boosters came with a precisely 1 land card, which means even though I have this giant box of cards, I can't really build a playable deck. There's not enough land in there.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Oh my. Oh geez.
It's for a new player coming in, and I'm sure I'm doing it wrong. Frankly, I'm sure I'm making some blunders here in what I'm purchasing and how I'm doing this. But I made some blunders. Now I'm not worried about it because of the outpouring of support I got on Facebook. Right? I could probably go out there. I'm sure there are resellers who will send me tons of lands for pennies because I know that anybody who's serious into collecting Magic cards eventually just has a surplus of those cards. For those who don't play the game, it's the basic resource of the game. There's 5 colors. There's 5 types. You probably want 20 of each, maybe, so you can build different color-based decks. So everyone that's contacted me, like the first thing I say is, would love to talk about it. I know all about the rules. Happy to teach you stuff. Happy to sit down. I have some pre-built decks we can sit down and play, and we can play them. Also, I have a ton of extra cards, and I'm happy to give them to you. I got a lot of that.
Yeah. Wow.
People have been playing the game for a long time. Are like, you know what? My closets are overflowing with cards. I'm sure any one of them, if I was like, yeah, I don't have enough lands, they would immediately slap down the table. Here's, 100 lands. Enjoy. Right? Because they're just, you buy enough boosters and whatnot, eventually you're swimming in these cards. It's the most common card in the game.
Okay.
But it's weird that, and I'm sure for the people who've been playing a long time, as they're buying boosters, they're like, oh, another land, right? And they chuck it, right? Who needs that? Right? So it's like one less valuable card in their booster pack, right? So the interesting thing to me is that the way the game is being sold is much more targeted at experienced players than at new players, right? The new player experience is kind of weirdly delegated to either the online stuff. Definitely, yeah, yes, I've
Right.
learned a lot just by jumping in and playing some arena, or through this communal way of like, well, go to the store, go to a tournament, find a friend who plays, find a mentor. Here we go, found it. There's our topic. Find a mentor to show you how to play the game. Seems to be kind of built in, right? Like, seems like they're leaning it. And what struck me as really weird is this is like exactly opposite to me of the progression that we saw with D&D. And what I'm talking about here is if in 1974 you bought this thing, right,
Mm.
and you were not a wargamer and you were not a person who like really understood gaming concepts, and you opened these books and you read them, you were probably lost, right? You probably had no idea, right? These books are hard to consume if you don't know the lingo and you don't know, right? I mean, heck, we make fun of this all the time, Dan, right? Like right there in the like listed required equipment is, another game. Okay, what?
Right.
I gotta go out and buy another game called Outdoor Survival. But of course they're like, yeah, of course you have that game, right? Of course you do.
Right. Right, exactly.
And I feel like anytime we talk to people who
also
were
chainmail.
around
Also chainmail. You need 2 prior games.
Also, yeah, that's right. You also need chainmail. Yep.
Right.
But I feel like most people I talk to who were around when this came out and were playing this edition of the game, most of them have a very common story about how they got into the game, which usually involves, well, I knew someone. I knew someone who was playing and they brought me in, right? And I feel like in the early days, that's how this game spread, right? I think, this is a bit of conjecture, but based on what I've heard from folks, the creators of D&D did not expect this level of success. Just like I'm sure the creators of Magic didn't expect their level of success, right? It was huge, whatever, surprise. And as it became more and more popular, right, they started to create things to help the mass market, right? You start to see,
right,
stuff like this come out. Basic set, like
a
little more consumable, a little more, right, and it's definitely targeted at, it's targeted at like you're a new player. Maybe you don't have a mentor who's teaching you how to play this game because you've just heard about it. Yeah, right, exactly. So let's help you down that road. And I feel like as versions of D&D have come out, I don't know. I guess I would say, if I cracked open the 5th edition player's handbook right now, I would say there's probably a lot of text in there that's like trying to get me to understand the basic concepts, right? Which is utterly missing from this version of the game.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to me that D&D kind of went the other direction. Like D&D started in a place where like mentorship was required, right? There was no way you were going to get into this game without being plugged into the community. Whereas Magic started with this like, you've never heard of a game like this, which is true, right? It was a kind of a new concept.
Yep.
So it came with like, they gave advice, there's a rule book in the box, here's the basic set, you can just buy 2 of these and just go play. And then and then now these days it feels like the way you get into Magic is know a Magic player, right? go to your local store, go to a local tournament, go to a friend who knows how to play. They'll help you get into it. Fascinating. Is that good or bad, Dan?
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question.
Is that good or bad?
I mean, let me just throw up the comment that William made as you asked this. I'm reading William's comment. It says, these are the types of games that I just bounced right off of. Large, hard to buy in. You need a mentor, and then there's the competitive nature, a bunch of other stuff, which can make the teaching-learning relationship tricky. And thanks for that, William. And, I think for some of us, I guess, that's a heavy lift. Reaching out to other people might not be entirely in my social wheelhouse, asking for help. My where I grew up, a very rural area, upbringing was like, raise yourself up by your own bootstraps, kid. And reaching out for a network of help was a huge blind spot for me for a very long amount of time, actually. So I agree with William. That would actually be very, at a particular age, it'd be very hard lift for me to proactively find and plug into a system like that, frankly. And as we've alluded to before, and as I kind of, sign language while you were talking there, I'm a person that did pick up the Holmes Basic set that box that you picked up there. Was the only person in my town or community that ever heard of this game, absolutely didn't have a mentor, and taught everybody else how to play it. So that box right there.
Similar-ish story for me, except it was this box.
Yep.
This was my entry, but similar-ish, and
let me just say that Moldvay box right there, right? So another classmate of mine, we were still in elementary school, got that for a gift, said, I can't figure this out, handed that box to me and said, could you please run a campaign for us? That was actually the longest running campaign I ever ran. Actually, was using those Moldvay rules. Went from, I believe, probably like 5th grade all the way through the end of high school. Like we were running with that set and the follow-up expert set. So I have a very fond spot for those 2 early basic sets.
Interesting. I mean, for me, as I thought about this, I was trying to quantify, like, did I have a mentor or not? Now, the fact is, I came across this box set not because I bought it or not because someone bought it for me, but because my father bought it for my mother, because this was targeted at the mass market, and Dad was like, I don't know, she likes this kind of stuff, right? It's got dragons and fantasy stuff. I don't know, cool. And she looked at it and was like, I don't know what the heck this is, and stuck it in her closet. And then, a year or 2 later, my brother and I come across it and decide, what the hell is this mystical, crazy-looking thing? And it's actually my older brother who dug into it, because by that time, I'm still too young, frankly. I definitely can tell you I have a strong memory. Yeah, I have a strong memory of looking at this book and seeing right here in the corner, it says, the original fantasy role-playing game for 3 or more adults ages 10 and up, and thinking, uh-oh, I'm going to get in trouble, because I'm too young to read this book.
I had another friend that was in the same ballpark, and I think one of the boxes said 13 or something like that, as I recall. And we were exactly in that situation where he'd gotten it as a gift and he'd like left it on his shelf because, like, well, I'm not old enough, and I was the one, and I'd already been DMing for a while. I was like, well, screw that, hand that to me. I'll run a game right now, buddy. That's not. There's no D&D police yet.
Yeah. So for me, the thing was, my older brother is the one who actually got into it. He tried to teach me. Frankly, I was still too young. I was too young to play the game. Didn't really understand it. Didn't have the patience or the attention span to deal with it. And then he ended up dumbing it down, and to the point of, like, we played a thing that was definitely not Dungeons and Dragons, which was much more like freeform, childish make believe. But it had the basic concepts of, we're telling a story together, and I had a piece of paper that had some things written on it about my character. And I got into the concept of role play that way, right? Then, I wasn't crazy about it, didn't like it very much, frankly, as a little kid. Eventually, when I got old enough to become interested in it, and that's when I started reading it. And frankly, old enough, meaning, like, I don't know, what was I, 8, maybe? By the time I'm reading that book and thinking, oh no, I'm going to get in trouble because I'm not quite 10, he had already moved on. He was already done with the game. Yeah. In fact, that's just been true. He never really. So was he a mentor? I don't know. He did kind of introduce me to the game and the basic concept of role play. But as for, like, actually getting into, like, okay, I want to sit down and play D&D, it was me in that box, and that's it. So that's fascinating. Now I think I would propose to you, Dan, and I think this is maybe was said in the chat somewhere, that mentorship, some form of mentorship, some form of experienced players teaching inexperienced players, is still intrinsic to the game of D&D, and possibly less so in terms of just learning the rules, but definitely in terms of going from being a player to a DM. I think that it's not really a thing. I think anyone that I'm aware of, apart from you, Dan, and maybe me, who, like, read the book and was like, all right, I'm going to figure out how to do this, right? I think usually, much more frequently, the answer is you experience being a player. You're like, this is fun. I want to do this more. I guess I have to run my own game. I guess I have to be the DM. How do I do that? And I've gone through this actually with a lot of people over time, of, like, people who I've introduced the game to, or not, who people who are players of mine who eventually got to the point of like, I want to run a game, and then came to me for advice. How do I do it? How, what do you do, right? And it's fascinating because it's not a thing where I'm like, oh, well, just take these. Here are these 10 easy steps that you need to follow. Bum, bum, bum. Go be a DM, right? It's usually much more like, well, you've played, you've watched me DM. Just do it. Just try, right? I'll answer your questions. Like if you have questions, hit me, right? And I'll answer them. But like at some point, you just got to do it, right? You just got to get in the driver's seat, and run a game, and see what happens.
Yeah. There are times when I fear that, because now that you say that, I actually have not had the experience of someone close to me who was a player that actually transitioned to DM like that. That I guided, and there are times when I fear that it looks too forbidding, like it looks too mysterious what the DM is doing, and because to me it feels very, very natural. Like that's basically my experience of D&D is from that side of the screen, and like I have a lot of players that go, oh no, I could never do that, and I'm like, well, it doesn't feel like there's that much to it. But on the other hand, the rather infrequent times when I am a player, when I sit on the other side and I'm maybe one of your players, I usually have a beat somewhere in the session where I go, why on earth would anyone do this? This is a nightmare. What, playing D&D? Geez, this is the hard. This is hard. That's the hard part. I don't know how anybody gets this side of it. Jeez,
that's funny.
Send me back over there.
That is, I think you're definitely an outlier here, Dan.
I've only got one character in this session. My Lord.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
I have definitely been in the position, and this is, we were talking about this up front of like what, when I proposed this topic, I was like, I had this anecdote about this discovery between the differences between Magic and D&D, but thinking that they both kind of are very similar in this, like how is the game spread, right? Really, like not just taught, but spread, across a community of people who like to play games. I kind of knew it was like this weird topic, and I wasn't sure where it was going to go, but my gut told me if we started talking about it, we would easily fill an hour. But I'm trying to come up with like, what is my thesis? And I feel like my thesis here is that like mentorship is intrinsic to roleplay. And I've run plenty of games that were specifically designed to be introductory games. Now this is probably just me that I'm in these weird positions, but I've been at video game companies where we had a license to the D&D license, and suddenly there's this energy in the office of like, well, we should play the game, right? Let's play the game. I don't know Paul, you know how to run this game for us, right? So I've done that plenty of times. I also remember when old school was starting to become a thing, right around like 2008 to 2012, somewhere in that time range, where I would run stuff at game stores or conventions that were very much like introduction to old school D&D, right? And yeah, that was kind of targeted at people who are used to the modern game and like, hey, guess what? There's an old version. Maybe you should give it a try. But I also got plenty of players at the table who were like, it says introduction. I've never played. Let's play, right? So I've definitely introduced the game to a lot of people, and I have been in that position plenty of times where somebody that I've been playing with a few times is like, yeah, I want a DM. How do I do it? And I go, well, I'm happy to be a resource. This is like, I feel like this is where it gets into really like not just teaching, but mentorship, right? Where I'm like, I'm available to you to help you through this process. You still have to do it, right? You are still have to figure out for yourself how to be a DM, but I'm here as a resource.
Great.
Which is fascinating. And I don't like, there's plenty of books out there, right? How to DM, right? There's, whether you're talking about the Dungeon Master's Guide, which frankly, I don't think is a good resource for how to DM. I don't know. It's a little, I feel like the Dungeon Master's Guide is usually intimidating because it's trying to both be that and be a reference of like, here's just a pure reference of like, right? I feel like sometimes it's like trying to say to someone, oh, you want to learn how to speak English? Here's a dictionary. Right? And you're like, is that really going to work? I think
I'll
maybe more
say, okay,
guide is a little
I
better,
will
but
differ that I thought that the first edition DM's guide written by Guy Gax was to me very useful. Now, again, I'm learning from the book, so I
yep.
could interpret that and say this is as close to a mentorship as I had. Very discursive. I mean, maybe that's part of what people don't like about it. I felt that I got a lot of the intent and the motivation and the sensibility of like how would these cases be judged at his table. And the player's handbook and the monster manual are very much more technical. Here's some stuff. Here's a bunch of spells. Here's a bunch of monsters. And at least the first edition DM's guide has a lot more conversation stuff. And I will probably the first edition DM's guide is probably the book that I have reread the most times. Period. End of story. So at least for me at a particular age, that was actually a very useful resource, I thought. Now, other people will differ. I'm just going to, just for a full disclosure, Laura Sudo is saying, I thought the first edition DM's guide was awful for learning. So great.
I'm kind of with Lord Pseudo on this one. Totally agree. I just find that density of text overwhelming, especially when it is that combination of both how-to and everything, right? Just here is the ultimate reference guide of all the rules of everything, right? Like you're both getting potentially like, here's how to organize a game and here's how to get your friends together and blah, 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 right? This how to do the logistics. And you're also getting like, here are all the rules for poison, right? Here are all the rules for, here's how to break down turns into segments. Like it's a lot. Now, there's other secondary books I think that have come out since. Heck, we just interviewed Justin Alexander, who has that book, So You Want to Be a Game Master, which I think is an excellent resource. But again,
coming out right now.
Surprised. Yeah, I'd be surprised if that was anyone's introduction to the game, right? I feel maybe that's what he's targeting, but I feel
it could
like
be again. Having read it again, it's my comparison is like a universal gear. It is an interesting book that Justin wrote. It does start at the most basic things, and it very quickly ramps up to very elaborate, sophisticated things, all in the same book. Is one of the interesting things about it.
I think it is probably a great book for a potential DM to read. Of like, well, I don't have a mentor, so how do I go about it? Boom, here's this book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little unusual for them to come across that, right? Versus like, well, I don't know, I'm dimly aware of D&D, I want to be a DM, I guess I'll buy the books, right? That would be my instinct. Let me go buy the official books.
Yep.
So,
let me just throw out. So Josh had an interesting point. So again, because we normally talk about Dan and Paul being the outliers as having not had mentors when we got into DMing, and me having learned absolutely from the book, and therefore I needed something like DM's Guide. So Josh is and we're saying that we're outliers for that. And so Josh is saying here, as somebody who was a first generation player, it was literally years before I gained with a DM who got into it with a mentor, which is an interesting vote on that side of it. And again, I was getting into it pretty early on, still the 70s, just barely. And there wasn't whereas it was being mass produced, there just wasn't anybody around to be a mentor. So, somebody that founds a, Gary didn't have a mentor for D&D or whatever. Well, I mean, okay, at least Dave Arneson didn't have a mentor for D&D. How about we can all agree with that? Yeah. Okay. Yep. So, so for any particular discipline, there's somebody that had to be first, or a generation that had to be first, at least.
Sure. Well, and likewise, like if I continue to draw this, kind of comparison to Magic the Gathering, or current day Magic the Gathering, which I think that's why I like making that comparison, because this is happening right now, right, in the Magic the Gathering community, that it's not written anywhere, right? Nowhere did I find anything official from Wizards of the Coast that said, hey, you want to get into this game? Maybe go down to a game store and, meet some people, right? Like that's, no. But it is the message I'm getting from the community at large on the internet through friends, whatever. Just generally the messaging I get is like, yeah, you should find someone who knows the game well and sit down and play with them. They'll be happy. They always, frankly, again, maybe this is just my circles, but everyone that I've talked about it is psyched to share their passion with me, right? They're very excited to get a chance to convert a new person to the game they love, and again, they're like, yep, willing to teach, absolutely. Have extra cards, right? Let me ease it in. Let me ease you into the game by, like, you can play with some decks that I've built, so you don't have to deal with the whole deck building part up front, right? Let me give you some cards.
Yes.
Let me give you a deck, right? And yes,
which is kind of analogous to possibly like pre-generated characters in D&D, right? Way to ease you into that process. Yep.
And to that end, like, Wizards definitely, and TSR over the time has definitely tried to do this and continues to try to do this, right? I can see right now, if I go into Amazon and I search for Magic the Gathering, I am, one of the top things is going to be that starter kit. That is, here's a starter kit, everything you need to figure out how to play Magic the Gathering, right? We saw TSR do countless iterations of trying to teach D&D from those basic box sets that we were looking at. I remember the big black basic box set, which tried to kind of board gamify it. Remember, was it called Endless? No, that's the Choose Your Own Adventure books. There was a. I have boxes of this stuff up in my attic where they did, like, things that came with audio CDs, where they, like, you could sit down and play a game with a not real DM, right? Like a CD that kind of walked you through.
Was there a line of, like, Gateway to Adventure or something like that, or was that just the logo to the company at some point in the 80s? Is that what I'm thinking of?
Gateway to Adventure was like the actually have it right here because it came in the basic box set, right? There was Gateway to Adventure.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Which is a catalog, Dan. It's a product catalog.
Now, I will say, right, there's an overwhelming need for that basic introductory thing. And the thing that pops into my head is that the Holmes basic set, right, was being developed at the same time that Gary was working on what was going to be advanced D&D, right? And I think they were both coming out in 77, 78. And so you had these parallel tracks of Eric Holmes working on what's going to be, his, as editor, the first D&D basic set, while Gary's working on his magnum opus of what's going to be advanced Dungeons and Dragons, with the first ever hardcover books for gaming, and it's elaborate art and all this kind of thing. Yeah. And we know that Gary actually edited, gave an editing pass to the Holmes Basic, and he inserted a bunch of, for higher levels, you should look for, all caps, advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But for the, if you want higher level, or you want halflings to be thieves, advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And he had some commentary, right? And he had some commentary in Dragon Magazine when they came out, right? And if you read between the lines just a little bit, you see that the basic set, right, which gets you into hobby shops, right, and toy stores for the first time, was an explosive success that wildly outshone the advanced D&D books that were coming out, right? Where I don't know what the multiplier is, but was some multiple times much more successful than the AD&D books. And you can see a little bit of just a slight little bit of poutiness on Gary's part, of he's a little ticked off that his elaborate multi-volume hardcover book set is being vastly outsold by Holmes' basic set. And that's actually why we have Keep on the Borderlands, right? Initially, module B1 was meant to be included in the basic set, In Search of the Unknown by Mike Carr. But that's a lot of money left on the table for the creator of that adventure. So Gary sat down and said, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have B2 replace it with my name in the basic set. And that's actually why we have, because he was a little bit grousy about how enormously well the market responded to that basic set. We kind of needed that.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Quick nod here to William, who identified First Quest is the product I was thinking of earlier. That came in CDs. That's the thing. Absolutely. And there was a ton of different stuff that came out in the 90s that was trying to teach D&D to a mass audience who didn't know it at all. But let me go back to, like, it makes so much sense to me as coming from the world of video game development. heck, we can talk about this in regards to Pool of Radiance, which you recently played in the Dan Plays Games from the Elder Times. You can absolutely tell that the early content is the content that gets most iterated. Right? It makes sense to me that the basic game would outsell the advanced game because only some subset of people who got through the basic game and were like, "I want more," are going to buy the advanced game, right?
Yes,
like, it makes sense.
Well
of
put.
course, it's going to outsell it, right? Just like, of course, more people played the slums in Pool of Radiance than actually fought Timur and Thraxus.
Great point.
Right?
Great point.
Right? Yeah.
Totally.
So anyway,
Totally.
So
So what do you think makes this is a really rich vein that we found, and I feel I would have another 3 hours of stuff I could say on this. So, just briefly, what do you think makes for a good mentor in that kind of situation, Paul?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's something I've thought about a lot because, again, because I have had these requests in the past of like, hey, I want to take up DMing. How do I go about doing that? And it's hard. I think that like there are in my mind, there are kind of three ways that you kind of come to grips with how the game is played, right? One is by reading, right? You can read the text, just read the text and imagine what the game is like, whether that's the raw rules or a book like So You Want to Be a Game Master. You can observe it, right? You can go watch some streams and like actually watch people playing the game, but in a passive way. Or you can
maybe like instructional information in an online stream, perhaps. I mean, like
right.
I mean, if you have anything you would recommend.
Oh, I mean, obviously, Critical Role.
Yeah,
I'm talking about like you're just observing someone in the act of running a game, right? You can observe someone who plays, just like you could, frankly, just be a player in a game and observe that and take the stance of like, I'm really going to watch what the DM's doing, so I can figure out how to do that myself, right?
Yeah.
It's a different mindset to bring to the table, and then there's just like kind of the learn by doing, right? Of just get in there, just try it, see what happens, make the mistakes, and let her roll, let her rip.
Yes.
So as a right, and personally, I know we all have different ways that we learn. We all learn kind of in our own styles. For me, the last option is the best. Of just get in there and try. And good luck, and make some failures, and off you go. And so that's frankly what I usually encourage people when they're like, "Oh, how should I do it?" I'm like, "You're overthinking it. Just get in there and do it." And then as a mentor, what I'd like to try and do is say, I can be a resource to you. When you have questions, you can ask me. If you would like me to play in your first game, so I can just be like a passive player that you could turn to and lean on is as needed, I'm willing to do that. Or I could just be like a mostly silent co-GM. I'll be your caddy, your gopher who's there to help and nudge and give advice as you play. Those latter two are a little difficult for me because like it takes some effort to like back away and be like, it's not my game.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Don't take the reins. Just be the resource. But other than that, I don't have good ideas. I mean, do you have good ideas of like how else can you be a good mentor to someone who's trying to learn to be a DM?
Well, so I would fall back. So having not really been in that specific situation, I would certainly fall back on the fact that my job is as a college teacher for my day job. So I certainly have at this point lots and lots of experience, introducing new people to disciplines in computer programming or math or things like that. And it's a slightly different situation, right? It's a different scale. So I have rooms of at least a dozen or 24 people that I'm trying to scale up to. Now that's a legitimate number of players that you can have table, right? According to original D&D books, or Bill Webb's game we were in, or we've had games with players in the teens that I've gotten to run. So the the take. So I have I read enough. Some of my bookcase here are books about how to be a better college teacher, actually. And completely coincidentally, I'm the past week or so I've been rereading Daniel Willingham's "Why Don't Students Like School?" and what can you do to make that different. And Willingham's a cognitive scientist who tries to bring how do people learn brain research to the table. And his, one of his takes in here, as far as when people do evaluations, when students, college students do evaluations of their instructor, there's usually like a dozen questions or so. But according to Willingham, it basically boils down to two things. And it boils down to, is the instructor nice and organized? More or less, that just predicts all the results in any kind of student evaluation. Is you should be nice and you should be organized. So more or less, if you're gonna mentor, you should know the game pretty well. You should probably give some advanced thought to what the first couple things to think about are. Like I would want to prep before. I over prep everything in my entire life. I get it, but I would want to think about, like, what are the top 5 or 6 things that I would want people to think about the first time they DM, maybe something like that. And obviously you're probably not going to be engaging in the D&D hobby with someone that you fundamentally dislike, but being welcoming and being inclusive and really listening. And like Isabel had a really great running coach that she adores to death, and she said the thing was, she came in and she saw, like, really heard and saw, where are you as the student right now, and think about, what do you need right now to possibly improve a little bit, and it's going to be different for everybody. So I think according to Willingham, at least those two things would be really essential. Of, first of all, listen. What is the other person's concerns? What are they worried about possibly stepping into the DM seat? And I think your idea about, like, actually watching them run it the first time and being available to iterate and to have a postmortem would be incredibly important. The other thing, I'll just to pitch out another thing. There's a famous book. It's 20 years old now, by Ken Bain, called "What the Best College Teachers Do." Yeah, go ahead.
I need to stop you just because I feel like there's a great point you just made that I want to underscore, which is to retrospect, right? To absolutely retrospect. I think that's huge. After they ran a game, especially if it's one that you observed or got streamed or whatever, like, it is a great opportunity to sit down and be like, well, what went well, what went poorly, like, what challenged you? What did you struggle with? Yeah, let's talk about that stuff.
And that's why I bring up the Bain book, because for that exact same reason. He's got about 8 chapters there, but the culminating one, and exactly what I want to emphasize, is improvement. It's a constant, but whether you're a college teacher, right, committing to forever iterating and finding opportunities for improvement is really critical to getting to that top tier. And I'm not only am I, looking for ways to improve my teaching all the time, but I'm looking for ways to improve on my improvement to teaching. Like, even in the last semester, I came up with these timed log sheets that while I'm in class, every 20 minutes goes by and actually log what I've been doing and how long it takes, so I can reflect on later where my priorities were and what things went well and what things I can improve in the future. So even now, I'm coming up with better ways to commit to the constant improvement.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, I've run plenty of games where I was trying something a little different, right? And I will say after the fact, well, this game was a bit of an experiment. I was trying to figure out if this, if doing something like this is a good idea. And I always catch myself as I'm saying that, because I realize, and this is probably advice I should give to anyone who's starting out to DM, is that every game is an experiment. That every single game I've ever run is always with the aim towards, well, how can I do it better next time?
Great.
I don't think I've ever ended a game and been like, done, perfect.
Right. The very thought, Paul. The very thought, tis to laugh. Right? Tis to laugh. Yeah, it's always an ongoing experiment, and commit to that, right? Go. You're going to get done. You're going to feel awful about some stuff, right? I'm going to feel, oh my God, that was just a tragic misstep that I made a couple times, and write it down, right? Keep a logbook, right? Keep a notebook where you jot down your thoughts in the hour after you ran the session, and you can reflect on that and think about how to get better as a DM. Yeah. Before we run out of time, I just want to touch back to where we started with this, was you in the situation right now of feeling, for some crazy ass reason, feeling compelled to pick up Magic the Gathering in 2023 of all things. So, I couldn't sympathize more, right? I've been in this situation in the past, and I want to call out that, like I said the other day to you, I don't think I've ever had a Magic the Gathering card physically in my hand ever, right? And you and I have obviously not played Magic the Gathering. I've never played Magic the Gathering. But Paul, I don't think we'd know each other if it wasn't for Magic the Gathering, right? If it wasn't for the boom, right? See, as soon as I said that, you'd realize what I'm saying, right? If it wasn't for Magic the Gathering, there wouldn't be a CCG boom, and there wouldn't be the company that we met at, because we met at, of course, we've mentioned a couple times on the show, we met at a company in Boston called Genetic Anomalies that was making an online collectible card game about the earliest one called Cron X. I believe it's shifted hands a number of times. I think some version of it's still viable today. And of course, the main win for it had a viable game that made money. We weren't the principals. We were hired there just as we were both starting our careers. And the main win for that company was when they pitched to make Magic the Gathering online. We weren't part of the pitch. Previously, when we had Peter Adkison on as a guest, I kind of roasted him a tiny little bit about why they didn't pick our company, why we came in second for Magic the Gathering online. But that's how we got, you and I got started in our video game careers. And look, we wouldn't, this show wouldn't exist, and you and I wouldn't even know each other if it wasn't for Magic the Gathering. Thank goodness that that Garfield threw that in the world and it took off.
Yeah, for sure. It's a it's a funny thing, because every time I tell people that, of like, oh yeah, actually I got my start in the gaming industry, in the video game industry, making online CCGs, and these days I feel like there was a time when I said that and people are like, oh really, right? And now, oh yeah, that makes sense. This is generally the response I get, and I'm like, no, you don't understand how weird that is. It was 1999. I was making an online CCG in 1999. Like, we were gnashing our teeth over the idea that like people aren't going to want to buy digital cards. They're not going to see value in that thing that doesn't exist in the physical space.
I couldn't make that comprehensible to my parents. Me trying to explain what was happening where we were. I did have one, right? I did have one video game job before that, and even that was already difficult. But collectible bits, and trying to, admittedly a little bit before its time, frankly.
It absolutely was. I mean, when I think about the model, the business model of that company was they gave the game away for free and then sold online collectibles in the game. I mean, now these days, that's like, of course, that's just how you do business, right? It was crazy.
Right, it's fully 20 years before cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or blockchain, or and people like, how are we going to use these NFTs? I have these cards, they're NFTs, they're on the blockchain. Please make a game out of them, right? You've been there like that, and we were at a place coming at it from the other direction, like 20 years too early.
Yep.
It was a good game. Anyway, my point is, I sympathize with this because when I landed at Genetic Anomalies, the first thing was, you got to learn how to play a collectible card game. And I'm like, okay, give me the starter. There was a starter deck, right, that you got for free. You download the app, I get it. And I spent several weeks learning how to play Cron X. Okay, great. I could do this and tap that and combine this and these things. Great. And what are we going to do now?
And that's like, even though I wasn't a Magic player, like I said, I did get into a game called Legend of the Five Rings that came out not long after, immediate competitor to Magic the Gathering. And how did I learn that game? I was at Gen Con when it was released, and their big promotion was they had the same kind of concept of a sealed deck of cards that was immediately playable. It had a little rule book inside it, and they were just handing them out like candy. Here's a free one. So, as I recall, if you got one, they would punch your badge to show that you had already gotten one. And I think there was a different punch for each day. So if you were really into it, you could probably get three of them, like, going back each day and being okay, give me my hit, man. Give me my free hit. And that's exactly how, like, the friend that I was going to Gen Con with, we each got a deck and we brought them back to our hotel room in the evening after playing all our D&D all day. and we're like, all right, I guess let's dig through these cards and figure out how to play this thing. There was no mentorship at that point in terms of how to play, because there just wasn't anyone to mentor. Like, there was a new thing, right?
Because you were first. You were first.
Yeah,
right?
we were first. Yeah.
Someone's going to be first.
Yeah, but it's just so
Amazing.
interesting to me that it feels to me, and I might be totally off base here, but it feels to me like the modern way of getting into Magic the Gathering is that they're just implicitly leaning on the community for doing mentorship. That there's an expectation that you're not just gonna buy it off the shelf. And again, it's not 100% because, like I said, these starter kits exist. I wouldn't be surprised if I went down to like Target and found them, or Walmart or whatever, and found them in the game section of like, here's a Magic the Gathering starter kit. Grab, buy it, and sit down with your friend and play the game.
Okay,
but
great. I mean, it is supposed to be a social hobby, right? So whether you're talking role playing or card games or whatever, or board games even, right? It is supposed to be a social hobby, right? The original intent was to, be playing it with other human beings. I think Josh commented earlier in the hour that most games through human history, you had to probably learn from a human being.
Yep.
So, it makes sense. That's where it should be, going to.
I would lean into this idea, and why my kind of thesis is like that it's kind of required is that, like, this is how the habit or the enjoyment of playing spreads, I think, right, is through mentorship. I mentor a group of people into learning how to play the game or learning how to DM. So I teach someone else how to DM. They go then start their own group. This is basically the definition of virality, of marketing virality, right? Like, this is how excitement around a game spreads. And it makes sense to me that you would want that, like, and you should encourage that. Like, why not?
Yeah. I mean, how it feels to me is sharing joy. I mean, to me, right? D&D fundamentally, and feel free to shave the trademark off it. I like these things. When open gaming came around, I was very hopeful that the core rules would be free. To distribute freely to people that when we got them to join us in our hobby. And for me, the game hits all the buttons all at once. It's math, it's social, it's strategic, it's fantastical, it's creative, it's imaginative, it's play acting, and it's everything all at once. And being able to feel fully used, find a hobby form that fully uses everything in me. I kind of wanted to constantly share that joy about that. And, regardless of whether it's benefiting a particular company or not, I wanted that in the world, expanding, bringing people together. If a company can make money off it, so be it. Not necessary in my opinion. But,
Dan,
I'm like that.
We are, yeah. Then we are totally out of time. What are your final thoughts on mentorship in D&D or RPGs or games in general?
Well, we know there's a huge continuum, right? So we know that you and I and some other folks in the chat learn from the books. Totally viable. Or at a time when you couldn't see online streaming, we would get in a basement with a bunch of awkward, possibly teenagers, right? Figuring out on the fly for the first time. And if other people learn better with with a more social situation, with mentors to help them, definitely do that. And again, the nice and organized principle, I think, from Willingham is pretty good. So I would be very warm. If someone wants to, play or DM, that's the best thing ever. That's the best thing ever. We should get in there and encourage that in any way, shape, and form you can, because that's what it's about.
Yep. I would even say that there is almost a form of mentorship going on when you run a game. The DM is mentoring the players in this hobby. In some way, right? They're sharing joy and they're teaching rules. They're, granted, you're also playing a specific role in the game itself, but I do feel like there's a form of mentorship happening there. And as I say to everyone, and I've seen this, especially when playing with new players, often there's hesitance. They're like, "Oh, well, I don't really know the rules. It's intimidating. It's overwhelming."
They're apologetic.
I don't want to.
Right? I always get, "Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
they're
so
very
sorry. I don't know how to
apologetic.
play D&D."
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
my response is, "This is the best thing. You don't understand. Getting a new player for the first time with fresh eyes is the single best thing about the game."
Yep, I totally agree. And that's usually what I try to say is like, "Oh, no, I love playing with new players. It's my favorite. Please come. Don't bother reading the books. I don't care about that nonsense. Just come and sit down at the table and enjoy the experience."
There you go. See, that's inviting. I think about this so much, Paul. We're on the same wavelength about that, right? And make it as inviting and warm, just like that, as you possibly can. That's where it ought to be.
There you go.
That's good mentorship.
Viewers, if you have thoughts on mentorship in games, how you've seen it, whether you think it's required or not, how we could incorporate it more into our hobby, give us a shout here in the comments. Tell us your thoughts, and we'd love to read them, and maybe that'll spin up a new topic for a future episode.
Definitely. Or maybe there's some new game that's being rolled out at PAX Unplugged this weekend that you've been picking up because you're there. Maybe leave a comment about what you think the next big up and coming is. We'd love to hear that. And of course, remember that you can like, follow, and subscribe to us. We're on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and GitHub and TikTok, and we have the handle Wandering DMs on all the sites. So please look for us there.
If you prefer to listen to us in audio-only podcast format, you can find those podcasts at our website at wanderingdms.com. Also through various carriers such as iTunes and Spotify, and a variety of others. If you are listening to this right now on a third-party carrier website and they give the ability to do so, please rate and review our show. That helps other users of that site find us, and we really appreciate it.
We really do. And of course, big thanks to our patrons who support the show. Just like Paul said at the top of the show, if you'd like to join them, please visit patreon.com/wanderingdms. And every single one of our tiers gets you access to our Discord server where the conversation continues 24/7 about all these kinds of topics and D&D and wargaming and horror games and 5th edition, anything that's very close to our hearts. We love, and we will be on our live after chat video in about 10 minutes to hear more great ideas about mentorship that we didn't get to catch in the chat as it flew by there. Now I think, Paul, we have one more episode that we're going to do this season for 2023, I believe. Have I got that calendar right?
Yeah, that is correct. We always take a little break around the holiday season, take about 3 weeks off to enjoy the holidays and to reset and start the new season 6 coming in January 24.
Oh my goodness. That's right. So, so we got one more. So next Sunday we'll have, I believe, our 40th episode of the year. And as some folks have reminded us, that also marks the 5th anniversary that we have been doing this. So we'll have a little bit, I think we'll be planning a little bit of a reflective show of our favorite bits this year. And frankly, our favorite bits of all time, going back to 5 years ago this month when we started it. So I'm personally looking forward to that next week.
Yeah, personal thanks to any of our viewers who contributed to the fandom page for Wandering DMs, which is now my primary resource for remembering what the hell we've done in the past. So thank you so much to our viewers for putting that together and for maintaining it. It's a great resource.
It's a group project, really. We need the whole party together. We couldn't possibly do this. So thank you guys so much. And of course, don't forget, the Wandering DMs with you guys, we're live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So please join us again next week for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.